Well, hello there. It's Yvonne from Women's Fitness Adventures. So nice to have you here with me today for our talk about hills and what hills really teaches us. And it's not just about fitness either. So tune in, ask away, feel free to comment and make this your own as well. So I'm here to share my knowledge and answer any questions you might have as well. But I know that everyone is at a different space and place in their hiking journey, and having been on, I can't count how many, hundreds and hundreds of multi-day hikes for the last 12 years all over the world, and thousands of women helping them with their hiking journey as well. I do know that we're all at very different stages in our hiking journey, but we're all active hikers, and that no matter how experienced or inexperienced we are, there is always something that we can learn from each other and learn about ourselves each and every time we go out on the trail. Trail's a lot like life. You never know what it's going to throw at you, and it can be varied. And we can be the most competent hiker out there, and one little element can change things and give us a really great lesson in how to adapt and respond and make ourselves a better hiker for next time. So today I want to talk about, last week was 5 tips to improve your pace without actually doing anything about your fitness. So today I'm going to talk about what hills really teach us, and it's not necessarily just about our fitness. So tune on in, ask away. Let me know if you're watching live. Hi, Elizabeth, finally alive. Let me know if you're watching live or if you're watching on the replay, and please ask away with your questions. So I I look and I watch and I learn, and as leaders, we all inside Women's Fitness Adventures, we talk amongst ourselves about what skills we see on the trail, where some learning opportunities and gaps might be, or what information can we pass on. So if you feel lightheaded or dizzy on hills, whether that's 20 minutes in or 40 minutes in or at some point, and hills are not your friend, for most of us, um, for most, going up a hill is preferable to going downhill. But for most of us, a hill means we get out of breath. Um, Sometimes we're not comfortable with getting out of breath. Depends how steep the hill is. You're probably cursing the person next to you or cursing under your breath. So if you start to feel lightheaded or dizzy on hills, no matter how far into that you are, 5 minutes, 50 minutes, or maybe a couple of hours, it might not be about your fitness. It could be that you haven't had enough carbohydrates in, so enough food to fuel what you're actually doing. It could be that you haven't had enough fluid, and not necessarily on the day. Carbohydrates and fluid can be for the preceding days as well. And if you are a member, we do have a masterclass that we did with our sports dietitian, Sean, that talked about our fueling prior to our multi-day hikes. And it doesn't matter if you're going on a multi-day hike or not a multi-day hike, fueling for any sort of training is really, really important. So it's not just on the day, it's what we've done in the preceding days. So if you didn't have dinner last night, and you're on a hike today, if you have generally been through the week not eating as much as you normally would because maybe you haven't felt great or the weather's been hot or whatever it might be, when you go out on a hike, whether it's your regular training hike or whether you're on a multi-day, you're already going in a little bit depleted. So that could be why you get dizzy or lightheaded on some hills. It could be that you haven't got enough sodium, that you haven't had enough electrolytes. And let's face it, summer here in Australia has been really warm for most of us, so we sweat a lot. And when we sweat a lot, we lose some of those electrolytes inside our body as well. Now, I'm not saying you have to have them, but if you're someone who gets lightheaded or gets dizzy on the hills, then maybe that's something you need to consider if you haven't considered it already. And I know for some of us, I get enormous cramps all the time. And I've started experimenting with the different levels and different types of electrolytes I have as well, because what served me a couple of years ago doesn't serve me well now. And I know that when I go uphill, I sweat more, especially in this heat, than what I do when I'm on the flat. So it could be, if you're also feeling dizzy or lightheaded on hills, it could be that you're, as I said, going in underfueled before you even start. So I know for a lot of hikers that enter my world is if we're starting a hike somewhere new, there's a lot of nervousness and anxiety about possibly being late or about getting to the trailhead, um, you know, following the right instructions to get there. And all of that requires a lot of mental energy. And it might be a 7 o'clock start and you've left home at 5:30. So 5:30 was probably the last time you ate. So by the time you get to the start of the hike, you're probably already used up a lot of that energy anyway. Or you might find you can't eat at that time of day. So you might start the hike underfueled and then 20 to 30 minutes in, you're feeling dizzy or lightheaded. So, we could use, we may have not added enough carbohydrates, we may not have added enough liquids, we may not have added enough sodium, and we're starting in underfueled. And then you put into the big mixing bowl the weather conditions. So humidity will increase our heart rate. The heat will increase our fluid loss, not only through sweat, but through our feet. Our socks can get really, really sweaty. Even if we're just in our normal, if you sit at an office or around home during the day, your feet will sweat. Or heaven forbid, if through our head and you're wearing a hat, you have thick hair, you might find that sweat is just sitting in there. So we've got all that fluid loss as well that we need to factor in. And so our margin for error gets smaller when you factor all of those things in. So, one of the ways that we can uh, learn about hills is take note of what worked today or what didn't work today, and use it as feedback for, okay, by the time you get to the end of this session, you'll have a whole lot of things for feedback on. That worked for me or that didn't, and make note of it. And, one of the things that can make us feel dizzy or lightheaded is when we hike in the heat, and we're not used to hiking in the heat. And I know that there's lots of hikers that will only, here in Australia, that I come across, that will only hike in the cooler months. But if you want to go to Europe and hike in their summer, the summers are getting hotter. And if you haven't trained for that heat, then that's going to make it just that extra bit harder when you do head over there, because the European summers are getting warmer. And if you haven't trained in any warmth, it is going to be just a bigger shock to the system. So let me check. Hello, Marie from Tassie, Kerry from Victoria, Ellen. Hello, Ellen. Hello, Christine. Hello, Lynn. Hello, Sharon. After sweaty hike through Nerang. Oh, I can't even imagine if you've just got back. I was out this morning and it was just agitatingly unbearable. So lovely to have all of you here. And if you haven't said hello, hello back to you. So another thing on what hills really teach us, firstly, is that are we looking at our fuels and our fluids? So, the intake, the food and the liquids that we're taking in or not taking in. The second thing that a hill hike really teaches us is what happens to our heart rate when we go up a hill. And if it spikes when we go up a hill, and it's going to, because there's a lot more effort, but if it spikes really rapidly, if you're starting out and then all of a sudden your heart rate's jumped up, then I want you to have a look at pacing. Are you, just attacking that hill full on and going as fast as you can, and trying to keep up with the people in front, or trying to beat a goal, which is fine because sometimes that's what the purpose is. Trying to keep up with the fastest, or are you moderating your pace? Or are you starting out, you're coming back from being ill, or you're coming back from, 2 weeks away, and you go, yeah, I'm the same person I was 2 weeks ago. We're not, but if we attack it in the same way, then that might be another reason that our heart rate spikes. And if you get out of breath really quickly going up on a hill, and we're all going to get out of breath, let me just say that. But if you feel that your breath gets too high too quickly, and that your heart rate goes up, and I know many, many people look at their watch to determine how they're going, then, there's a few simple things that you can do if that bothers you to lower that heart rate and reduce getting out of breath. And we spoke about this last week in terms of ways to increase your hiking pace without fitness. And one of those things is on those hills is if you find that you're constantly getting out of breath, your heart rate is constantly spiking, is to reduce your stride length. It is to slow down your tempo, and it is to control your breath. And what we want on a hill is that we are that steady tortoise that just rolls along up the hill, gets to the top of the hill, and keeps rolling through the hill, rather than stop, start, stop, start, stop, start on the hill. So if you find that in your hill hiking is your biggest bugbear, that you get out of breath so quickly and your heart rate spikes, then take that as feedback that perhaps that approach could be done differently. What if I tried it this way? What if I slowed down? What if I controlled my breath? What if I halved the speed that I go up the hill at? So I don't go full bore, stop, go full bore, stop. What if I halved that speed and was able to keep going and control my breath, and then my heart rate didn't spike as much? So have a look at your pacing when you're going up a hill. And just remember though, everyone does get out of breath going up a hill. There's no way around that. So the other thing that hills teach us, they teach us a lot of things, and you'll learn to love the uphill. I know, because over the years I've had many women tell me they'll be lying on a beach looking at those sand dunes going, whoa, I could do some repeats up those sand dunes. So what happens if you are going up a hill and your feet feel really heavy? Hi, Leonie. And that can happen for a whole lot of reasons. But if you're going up a hill and your feet feel really heavy and you think, oh, this is just like lugging logs up a hill, then think about when you were doing the training, did you have the same, have you got the same pack weight on that you had last week? Have you got more load in the pack than you had last week? Are you training lightly and then going out on a hike once or, once every couple of months with a heavier load and expecting it to feel the same as if it was when it was lighter before? The load that we put on our back changes our mechanics. It changes our center of gravity. It changes whether we're forward or not. It changes whether our shoulders are open, whether our hips are in. So if your legs are feeling heavy going up a hill, yes, it might be the incline, but it might be what you've got or haven't got in your backpack. And, always with training, we need to have our water, because we know that water is one of those things, water and a few snacks, that helps us from getting dizzy and lightheaded on a hill. But as we put more load in our pack, our energy demand goes up. We actually need to use more energy because we're carrying more weight. So don't underestimate whether it's a 2-kilo pack or not, but certainly don't skimp on safety by not putting anything on your back either. But as our energy demand goes up because we put more weight on our back, our fatigue rate, the rate at which we'll fatigue, the threshold is a lot lower as well. So think about that. Think about, which is why we say in all of our training, hi Gillian, is to only increase something by 10% over time, and only increase one variable at a time as well, because you want to know if something is giving you feedback that it's not working, you want to know what that one element is that wasn't working. So we've covered on our, so far on what hills really teach us is, if you feel dizzy or lightheaded on hills, look at food and look at, your fuels and your liquids. If your heart rate spikes and you really rapidly get out of breath, then look at your pacing. If your legs feel heavy going up a hill, then look at your load. Now, all of these things have nothing to do with fitness. We often think hills, and what happens is we just need to get fitter. But all of these things I've spoken about have nothing to do with fitness yet. They're all to do with these habits and systems that we're creating for ourselves. And the feedback, if we're listening to ourselves, if we're listening to what's happening in our body, did this work? Did this not work? Rather than, oh, I was a failure today. That just doesn't work. Training is where we want the feedback, so that when we get on our great day out hikes or our multi-days, we've tried and tested all of these things. If you feel mentally foggy, this is not a menopause trick question, then we want to look at our brain energy as well. Now, we know that putting good carbohydrates into our body not only fuels us in terms of energy. After 90 minutes of hiking in general, we'll have depleted all of our carbohydrate stores. So really important to have great, carbohydrate snack or breakfast or meal before you start out on your hike. But if we feel mentally foggy on a hike, we go out there, we want to have Mother Nature embrace us, we wanted to do all that forest bathing, and we generally come back feeling a whole lot better than what we started out. If we started out in a fabulous mood, we come back, just over the top. But the technical terrain will require a lot more concentration than a flat terrain. Now, when we have to concentrate on something, we use liquids So we use that water that's in our system, and we use energy to concentrate, which is the fuel that's gone in. So if we've gone in under depleted to start, or depleted, not under depleted to start with, and now we're having to really concentrate. The trail might be technical, there might be lots of tree roots on the way up, or lots of rocks to navigate, or there may not even be a path. You're forging a path. That requires a lot of concentration, which is requiring a lot of energy and a lot of liquid as well. If we're driving to a new location to start our hike, and we're concentrating and we're nervous, that's going to contribute to some brain fog if we're not fueled and we're not taking on enough liquids as well. Our concentration uses glucose. So, we need to go into things fueled and prepared for the task that we've got ahead of us. So our brain will consume a whole lot of energy on anything that's new, if it's on uneven ground, if we have to concentrate, if it's technical, if we've got to step over, if we've got to step under. And particularly then if we might be a little bit nervous or anxious, we're going to double that amount of energy that we need, not literally, but we're worrying about it and heightened it in our head. So it just intensifies the situation. So if you're feeling flat or feeling a bit wobbly on some technical hills, it might be that you don't have enough brain food going on in there. So remember, nothing that I've spoken about has anything to do with fitness on hills at this point. So my last point is, if you are out on a training hike and it's a couple of hours long, and if you're not in our world, the Women's Fitness Adventures world, and thinking training hike, what is this? If you're booked onto a multi-day hike, we really do suggest that you train well ahead of time. And I know some of our members on here are superstars at training. They just literally follow the program, and that is such a great thing to do. But if you're out for a training hike and it's 3 hours or 4 hours or whatever it might be, and remember, you don't have to replicate multi-day hikes in your training. You just need to understand how your body responds in system, or responds over time to different conditions. But you also have to understand how important it is to get time on your feet, experience on your feet on the trail, because that's probably the number one determinant of your success when you're out on a multi-day hike. But if you fade halfway in your training hike, or you're on a multi-day and you're fading, look at your consistency of the training hike. So if the training hike is 3 hours and you've literally gone hard and fast for the first half and you fade, then that's good feedback to say, okay, well, that didn't quite work for me. I need to slow that down and moderate my pace so I can last for the duration. Or if you fade halfway, are you doing the training at your own rhythm, or are you following someone else's rhythm or someone else's pattern, or because someone else said that was a good idea? Do you kind of surge and come back? So we know that if you start to fade halfway or 2/3, that perhaps it's your consistency of how you hiked that day. So, are you being consistent with, you might go really fast on that hill and then not fast on the next one, or you might go fast on all of them for the first half an hour and then fade out. And are you being consistent with your training, or are you just showing up once every 6 weeks to train and wondering why, the hills aren't feeling any easier because you haven't had an opportunity for all that wonderful feedback that you're getting from your training to implement and take forward to the next time that you do it. We know that hills will reward a steady effort rather than bursts. I've seen it. You can just watch any hikers or any walkers out there on any hills, whether it's in the suburbs or in the trails, that it's very rare for someone to be able to push really fast to the top of a hill and not have to rest. But it's more common to see people who are steady and slow and deliberate and intentional going to the top of a hill and rolling all the way through it. So there were 5 things that hills teach us that weren't about fitness, that if we take the feedback of, will help us in our hill fitness. So it's like a system. So if we train to experiment with ourselves, so every time we go out training, it's feedback for our body and feedback for ourselves for the next time we go out there. So we train to experiment. We train to test our fuel. So did I Did I eat enough during the week? Now, I've got a big hike coming up this week. I'm away for 5 days, but 3 really big days of hiking, 20K a day over 3 days, and it's hilly. And I know that I have to, a couple of days ago, start fueling and start hydrating so that I'm going in fully prepared. It is not the time to think about going on a diet because I'm going to be expending a lot of energy on top of my basic metabolic rate. So, on top of what my body needs to just exist and function each day, I'm going to be burning a whole lot more energy than that. So, I need to make sure I'm going in really well fueled and really well hydrated as well. But we also, in all the training that I do and all the training that, we teach others, is that the timing of our hydration matters as well. So I try to, on my, mornings when I go to training, is make sure I have a big glass of water before I leave home, or even as soon as I get out of bed, a big glass of water. I'll have some hydrolytes on the way to my training as well. And then at the end of the day, I'll have some more hydrolytes. So I'm trying to, in terms of my training, get enough water in before I even start so that I'm going in that day hydrated, because we all do lose water overnight. In my training and in the training that we teach is all about pacing control. So when if, on our training plans, we say do hills, 5 minutes out and 4 minutes back, and do that again for 5 times, is that we want to manage the pacing. It's not just random and a great idea, Yvonne, to send me out 5 times for 5 minutes and then I can just wander back. I want you to pace yourself so you get to the same spot each time at the same time. So the same rhythm, how does my body feel when I have to do that 5 times over and over again? And it also, when we go up hills and we get out of breath or we don't get out of breath, are my breathing patterns the same? If I'm finding that that hill there just wiped me out and I was so out of breath and I went, "Phew, I can't do that again," what what was the feedback from that? Was it that my pack was different? Was it the weather was different? Was it I went too fast? Was I not hydrated enough? If it didn't work for you, what's it trying to tell you so that we can adapt that into our training for next time? Our load tolerance as well, our pack weight. When we were in New Zealand a few weeks ago, I had to carry extra into the hut, and I hadn't carried, 15 kilos over 17 kilometers for quite a while. So I started to get sore in my shoulders. Now I've been doing a bit of work and my shoulders and body isn't the same as when I wore last wore a full pack, and started to get some, little blisters and rubbing on my shoulder. So what was that telling me? It was telling me that the load was literally too heavy for what I was trying to do. So I needed to adjust and move some things around. But it was all feedback. It wasn't that I was a failure. It was just feedback from my body going, "Hey, that's not quite working. What do you need to do to start to adjust?" Hello, Marianne. And then the heat response, which is probably the biggest whammy of all for all of us. It is not super fun hiking in warm heat. We don't know how our body is going to respond. No one wants to get heat stroke. No one wants to be dehydrated. But, when we travel to locations, if we go to Europe in summer, in the European summer, if we go to even New Zealand is having out of season warmer weather, is that we need to understand how our body responds in the heat and how it responds in the heat going uphill as well. So a heat response can give us some feedback, is that, okay, today I was really hot and I was going up that hill and my feet felt really sweaty in my shoes and socks. Perhaps I wore the thicker socks today that I didn't need to wear, or I wore, a big broad brim bucket hat today, and that was just too hot for my head. There was no opportunity for my head to breathe. All of these things that give us feedback on hills. Hills will teach us more than most other things on training is hills, because hills are the things that we get in our head when we're going up there. So the key is to learn in our training. It's about testing things out, about listening, looking for the experiment. We're the live experiment in our training, and giving ourselves that feedback, and then starting to adjust things and then refine it, and just keep going with that loop. And you'll eventually go, you know what? For me, if the hill is like this, then I can kind of go at that pace. If the hill gets like that and I'm carrying my normal backpack, then I can go at, that pace. If it's a warm day, I know I need to start to adjust. If I know I'm going to be out for more than an hour and a half, then I need to take on more fuel, or I need to eat earlier, or I need to, eat at the start of the hill climb or whatever it is. Just remember when we're going up a hill, there's always a hill after lunch. That your body, if you've just eaten, your body's trying to digest as well. So you want to keep the food as simple carbs as possible, with a bit of protein, just to make sure it can break down, because our body's trying to use all this energy going uphill and trying to break down the food as well. So keeping it as simple as possible. But hills will tell us where we need to adjust. There'll be the real honest feedback for, what we need to adjust. It's like, we don't know what we don't know, but if we're listening to our body saying, well, that worked or that didn't work, there's no sense in doing the same thing over and over again if it's not working for you. But fitness takes time. Fitness isn't something I can say I want to be fit and tomorrow I'm fit, because it's a relative thing, and fit on that hill isn't necessarily fit on that hill. But the systems can improve quickly. So if you have a system of, okay, on hills, I walk relatively slow so that I know I don't have to stop, and that works for me, then that system will help you improve on hills. If your system is, I know that I get lightheaded and dizzy within 20 minutes of being out in warmer weather and hills, but I know that if I hydrate and have half a litre or a litre of water before I get to the trail, then that minimizes or pushes out the length of time that it takes before I start to get to that feeling again. So if we start to understand the systems that support us as hikers, it will eventually help us with our fitness for the hills. And hills will feel very different with the systems we embrace. So if you think, okay, well, hills aren't my thing, and then when I put a heavier backpack on, then it just destroys me, is okay, that's really great feedback. What does that mean? What does that mean for me? Because when I have a system or a process around how I tackle the trails, it actually will improve your fitness over time. So fitness takes longer, but systems don't. So use those systems. And I know one or two of you watching here have some great systems set up because you live remotely, and you have some wonderful systems set up that help you, that give you that feedback, as to how you're progressing, and where you need to make those adjustments. And we know that when we have those systems and processes that give us that feedback on our body, we're steady hikers, and steady hikers will go far. Steady hikers will go far. We don't have to be the fastest, and we don't have to be the fittest, but if we have these wonderful systems that support us and are always open to feedback for, within ourselves, talking to ourselves, going, that worked today, that didn't work today. Why is that so? That's so because, well, I didn't sleep very well last night, and I ended up getting up, went to bed at 2 a.m. and I got up at 5 a.m. and I'm really tired, and that's why it didn't work today. Fantastic feedback. Next time you go to bed at 2 a.m., it's probably like, well, I don't need to get up and go for a hike in the morning because I know that it's not serving me well. So, just use all of those things as feedback. And you'll find that when you have those systems that work for you, we don't have to match anybody else, but those systems that work for you, you'll find that the hills will be a little bit easier to embrace. They're not going to be always easy, but easier to embrace when you have systems that help you manage those inclines. So that is it from me tonight. I might have some more things to say next week when I come back from my big hike, about trails and off trails and hills and all different conditions that I'm on. So stay tuned for next week. But thanks for dropping in. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments and I will get to them when I can. Thank you for watching, and thank you for saying hello, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.